Well, it's time now for a look at the day's top business news, starting with struggles in the Japanese economy. Cole Stangler is here to tell us more. Cole.
That's right, Hax. The world's third largest economy shrank at an annual pace of 6.3% last quarter. It's not just worse than expected, it's actually the worst contraction since the middle of 2014, and one that comes at an especially inopportune time. As uncertainty mounts over the coronavirus, there are fears Japan could be on the brink of a recession. That's 2 quarters in a row of negative growth. Catherine Viette has more on why Japan's economy has slumped and what lies ahead.
Fears of a recession are growing in Japan after the government announced its economy shrank at the fastest pace in 5 years. The country's GDP fell by an annualized rate of 6.3% during the final quarter of 2019. A number of factors played a role, including a hike in the sales tax from 8 to 10% in October, which hurt consumer spending, as well as damage from Typhoon Hagibis in the same month. And then there's U.S. trade tensions dragging on exports. In December, the government approved a $120 billion stimulus package aimed at cushioning the impact of the sales tax hike. But ripple effects from the coronavirus are hitting Japan hard. China is its largest trading partner and also its biggest source of tourists, but now they're not traveling. Supply chain disruptions, too, have forced Japanese companies to either adjust or halt production, which will likely impact the country's exports. In response, the government says it's ready to take all necessary steps to deal with the outbreak and announced it's earmarked $139 million to fight the economic impact of the virus, including measures to enhance airport checkpoints and better testing capabilities.
Next up, French rail giant Alstom has confirmed it's in talks to acquire the train division of Bombardier. At the same time, it says, quote, no final decision has been taken. Comes after the Wall Street Journal reported a preliminary deal had been reached. Either way, any merger would likely face intense scrutiny from the EU. Last year, regulators blocked Alstom's attempt to merge with German firm Siemens, citing antitrust laws. Based in Canada, Bombardier is heavily indebted and said last month it was planning a series of divestments. Let's take a look now at the day's trading action. Gains on the major European indices to kick off the week. The FTSE in London up around 0.4% should have those European numbers there. As you can see here, the DAX in Frankfurt up around 0.5%. Similar story on the CAC 40 here in Paris. Alstom shares up over 3.5% as those talks with Bombardier continue. More of a mixed bag on the major Asian indices. The Nikkei down 0.7%, taking a hard hit after that disappointing GDP data. The loss is somewhat cushioned by faith in the government response. Shares in Shanghai, meanwhile, up over 2%. It's after stimulus measures were announced over the weekend to combat the coronavirus. The Hang Seng and Hong Kong up 0.5%, while the Kospi and Seoul just around the flat line. Meanwhile, shares for Bayer are in negative territory, down over 2%. It's after a jury in the U.S. ruled against the German drug maker, a decision that comes with a bit of a price tag. It awarded a peach farmer in Missouri some $265 million. It's after he blamed an herbicide sold by Bayer and a rival firm for destroying his crop. The ruling is set to bolster more than 140 similar lawsuits. They allege the herbicide known as dicamba drifted onto crops unable to resist it. Next up, General Motors is putting an end to its iconic brand Holden, the first mass-produced vehicle in Australia. It's part of a wind down in the country and in New Zealand, and one expected to result in some 600 layoffs. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison has even weighed in, slamming the U.S. automaker as it continues a $1.1 billion global restructuring.
It's the end of an era for the iconic car brand Holden. General Motors has announced it will stop selling the beloved Australian cars and start winding down operations in Australia and New Zealand in the coming months.
This was an agonizing decision for us and one that we didn't make lightly or easily. Regrettably, despite the tireless work of many good people, the business case could not meet GM's investment thresholds.
GM says it's become too costly to support a brand that operates in just 2 markets. The Australian government says it regrets GM's decision.
I'm disappointed, but not surprised. But I am angry, like I think many Australians would be. Australian taxpayers put billions into this multinational company, and they let the brand just wither away on their watch. And now they're leaving it behind.
Reports say about 600 people would lose their jobs in the next year. Under the hashtag RIP Holden, Australians took to social media to lament the loss of the iconic brand, with many sharing photos of their first Holden cars, including Scott Morrison tweeting, "My first car, wish I still had it, Holden Kingswood." As part of efforts to exit underperforming markets, GM is also pulling out of Thailand and plans to sell its plant in Rayong to China's Great Wall Motors.
Now, GM is not the only automaker fighting headwinds. A German court has ordered Tesla to temporarily halt production of its first electric car factory in Europe. The company had already begun clearing forest on the job site, a move challenged by an environmental group. It cites potential risk to drinking water, among other issues. Under the new ruling, Tesla will have to wait for a final court decision before it can keep cutting down trees. The company has aimed to complete the highly anticipated plant by the middle of next year. And finally, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is in Brussels today. He's meeting with top EU officials, including Commissioner Thierry Breton and Margaret Vestager, Executive Vice President of the Commission. Big reason why the EU is crafting a new digital policy, including rules to govern artificial intelligence. First draft of that AI policy is expected Wednesday, with the debate expected to continue throughout the year. It's a delicate subject, not in the least because of privacy concerns. Paxi, Facebook, of course, come under a lot of fire for not doing enough to protect user data, and I think it's safe to expect that issue certainly surface at this meeting between Zuckerberg and EU officials, an issue to follow over the coming months as well.
I would agree. Cole Stangler with a look through the business news. Thank you very much. Well, that's all we have time for right now, but do stay tuned. There's more news coming up in just a few minutes' time here on France 24.